Happy Sunday! Welcome to our phenomenal episode of Let's Talk About You. Trust me, this show is worth the wait. It is so worth the wait. I have a panelist of five phenomenal women. We're going to talk about things that concern us, not just us as women, but us as a community. And I'm just going to dive right into it because you guys already waited for us and we are here. I want to say thank you to our sponsors and um, let's hit it for our sponsors. I want to say thank you to Kiki Creations and Infinitely Me for being the supporters and sponsors of Let's Talk About You. I want to thank our listening audience for coming out to spend your Sundays with us today. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Um, I'm going to bring on our phenomenal guests one by one. Great collaborative conversation. We have a mother and daughter duo, Dr. Debora Wright-Huyghue and her daughter Brooklyn Francis. We have Miss Dawn Stewart, Dawn Jeffries, and we have Pastor Kimberly Rodriquez. Later on, we may have a pop in from Alison. She's running a little behind, but we're going to just dive right into it. Ladies, thank you so much for saying yes to Let's Talk About You. We have so much to cover, so much to talk about. But before we dive into our subject at hand, I want you ladies to just give us a little snippet about who you are and what you do. I want to start with our mother and daughter duo, Dr. Wright. I know that I'm going to get it for it because I'm accustomed to saying Dr. Wright, my name, but Dr. Wright-Huyghue and Brooklyn. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice, Dr. Hugh.
Hi, good afternoon. I am an OBGYN, obstetrician gynecologist. I've been practicing here in St. Thomas for almost 19 years. I see most of the patients I see at the Department of Health's Family Planning Clinic, and also the MCH is where I see prenatal patients. I also spend a little time at Red Hook Family Practice in Yacht Haven Grand. My calling and my ministry is public health, taking care of the public. And as my older daughter, who's not with us today, used to say, fixing women. Most of them don't need any fixing, but just a little tweaking. And so we work together to get that done. So it has been my pleasure and my blessing to serve this community. I hail from Opelika, Alabama. I trained in New England and also in Georgia, and as I said, I've been here, and I's an island girl now. And
yes, you are. You are such an island girl. Brooklyn.
Hi, my name is Brooklyn Francis. I'm here with my mom. I grew up here on St. Thomas. I'm currently in school at Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, studying social behavioral and population sciences. But I'm here in the Virgin Islands for a few weeks doing my practicum on adolescent behavioral health.
Thank you. And one of the great reasons why I'm so glad to have Brooklyn on the team, because most of the women on the panel are seasoned women, but Brooklyn will bring some youth and light to our conversation. So I want to say thank you for saying yes, Brooklyn. And now we have Ms. Dawn Jeffries.
Hi.
Hi, Dawn.
Hello. So I hail from St. Thomas, but I have been in Arlington, Texas for the past 30 years. I have over 16 years of experience in social work and public health education. And I left the field about 17 years ago to become a full-time homemaker. And now I've picked the baton back up because mental health, that's my passion and my ministry.
Yes, yes. And we have Pastor Kimberly Rodriquez.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I see that I'm hailing from Nashville, Tennessee, and I have been involved in a lifetime of promoting and empowering women. I was former pageant girl growing up, and I saw what it did for my self-esteem. So I parlayed that into a pageant system that we started in the Virgin Islands, which became very successful. And I just have enjoyed making women aware of how amazing they are. So now, after I was ordained as a pastor, I decided to deal with the family, because now I noticed that the breakdown in a society begins with the family. So my focus right now and in the duration is getting women prepared to be wives, getting women prepared to be humble and very vocal, but yet influential and inspirational leaders in their community. Many of us have been through relationships that have done a number on our self-esteem. I'm also bringing back women into their proper place, into their power center, no matter what has happened to them in their lives. So now we have began to work in our community with the men as well. So I have decided to specialize in building back the woman and building back the woman and man as a unit in relationships so our society can thrive once again. So thank you for having me, Camilla.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ladies, thank you so much. So when we as women and individuals, we have so many things that are on our plate. And, one thing that is my new phrase is I need to eat less. And I do need to eat. Family, we have our relationships, which doesn't always mean romantic relationships. We have relationships with our coworkers, relationships with our friends, with our family members. We have our careers. We have what we do in our ministry, which is our everyday service. And we do so much. And as we do and we give and we feel good about it, giving, there's still a part of us that is depleted and needs to be replenished. And that's what I want. One of the many things that I want for our listening audience to do. I want us to replenish them. And let's dive into relationships. And I know, other than myself, Brooklyn and myself, we're the two that have never been married on this platform. But I would like to talk about relationships, being married, not being married, and relationships with our family members. And I would like to start with Dawn. Let's talk about some of the dynamics about having relationships. And ladies, please feel free to chime in, because this is just a free-flowing conversation that we're going to have. And our listening audience, if you guys have any questions based on things that we talk about today, please put it in the chat, because you're included in this conversation as well. Dawn?
Okay. So in all transparency, I've been married twice, divorced twice. I believe probably the main reason for that is that when I entered in, I poured 100% of myself into my marriages, 100%. The problem was that I didn't get that anything poured into me. I was doing all of the pouring. And part of that is because I went into the relationship knowing what I wanted to be to my partner, but I didn't know what I needed my partner to be for me. I didn't know my own value. And what happens when you don't know your own value is that you will allow someone else to place a value on you. And a lot of times that value is a lot lower than what it should be. And so because I didn't really know what I needed, what I expected, what I deserved, I accepted anything. And anything and everything is what I got, except for what I needed. So I think it's very important, especially for the younger women or even the older women who have never been married. You need to know your worth, and you need to not compromise on your worth. And you need to give, but you also need to have it given back to you, because an empty pitcher can't pour. So.
Great point. Dr. Hugh?
Got unmuted. I totally concur with what Dawn says. And I mean, I think what she says talks, knowing your worth speaks to marriage, and it speaks to pretty much all relationships. I think so many of us, that's just kind of almost how we were trained, to just pour everything into everything and almost anything, not necessarily be even as discerning as we need to be to realize that every situation doesn't even necessarily deserve everything we've got. So I think it really is time for a reset. And I think that's part of what your show is doing, to really just kind of say, hey, we kind of jumped on board with a lot of these adages and go in and give it all you got, and I'm every woman and all of these things. And I think there's still some truth to that, but we really have to, first of all, define who we are for ourselves, what our worth is, and then be able to enter into whatever room and ever relationship, knowing what it, just being as clear as we can be about what we want, what we're going to give. So I think that's well said, Dawn.
Thank you.
Know your worth. Sums it all up.
Kimberly?
Yeah, I think there's 3 elements that we need to understand in relationships, because, with this feminism movement, and we've had a lot of misinformation come across to us because of the feminist movement. Now, I'm not at all picking on the feminist movement, but the feminist movement's main mantra was, you don't need a man, you don't need a man. And like Camilla, I believe that is totally against the structure of God. Number one, you do need a man because Adam needed Eve and Eve needed Adam. So we got to trace this thing all the way back to the very beginning of how they did it then. Now, the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding piece comes in when you are choosing a mate or you are considering letting somebody in your space. You got to have a knowledge of who that man is, okay? You have to have a knowledge of, is he a God-fearing man? Is he a family man? And you can't do that in 2 or 3 months, right? You can't do that in 6 months. And you have to understand if he has life goals as a family man, if he sees himself as an individual and the family would be kind of tagging along. How do you do that? You look at the people in his family, the background, the dynamic between him and his parents, the dynamic between his mother and his father. And you make a judgment if that is something that you would like to contend with and something that you would like to have as your lifestyle. Okay, so the wisdom comes in. Well, we all know, because we're all God-fearing. 2 people that are unequally yoked is not going to work. And Dawn, I'm with you. I've learned so much because I too have been married twice. I too have been divorced twice. And the beauty of that is you learn so much, because I know I'm not supposed to die alone. I know that I'm supposed to have a mate, and so are you guys. And yes, I have a degree, and yes, I'm an ordained pastor, but that is not what I bring to the table for a man. And I applaud you all for your degrees, but don't show up to a man talking about, I got my degree in this. He wants to understand, does this woman have the wisdom to know what her role is? Does this woman know that her strength is operating in her feminine energy? Does this woman know how to bridge the gap between the communication that she and I may have, or also the communication that may happen between my children if we are to get married? All right. So, Dawn, the men that we married, they made great choices because we're great women. They made great choices. They were smart.
Yes.
Okay, they really were. And it's not a big head kind of thing. It's just the facts, right? God-fearing women, educated women, on fire for God women, focused women. They were smart because we chose to sacrifice So when you go into relationships, you have to have the wisdom to know, wait a minute, is this man going to require a lot of sacrifice for me? From me? Is he going to ask me or allow me to be and flourish and become fully who I am? Or is he somebody that says, no, Don, kind of cool that down a little bit. No, Don, kind of pull back on that a little bit. No, Camilla, you're just a little bit too excited about life. You don't need that decorating company. You already work a job. Or is he saying, you know what? You're amazing. You can do it all. You can have it all. And I'm with you. So that is first and foremost what we got to seek is the right mate with the knowledge of who he is, how he's been brought up, the wisdom to know that he knows who I am and what I bring to the table outside of my degrees and accolades. Okay. And understanding. We have to understand what is a relationship? What is a marriage? What are we supposed to be doing? It's just like she said, you got to pour into me and I pour into you. Sometimes I'm pouring a little deeper. Sometimes you're pouring a little deeper. But if we're going to be on this track, because we're meant to be together, first and foremost, if those other two things are in place. So now we just got to get the understanding of how to make it work, right? How to approach each other in sensitive conversations without an accusatory tone, a tone of, let's discuss this because I want to understand, not I want to get my point across to you. That is something that we have to learn through our communication. When we have understood those three things, the knowledge, the wisdom, and understanding of relationships, we're going to choose well. And I thank God, and I know Dawn does too. I thank God that I had those bumps in the road and knocks upside my head, things that didn't work out. Because truth be told, the relationships that I was in before, that would not have served me for the rest of my life.
Exactly.
They wouldn't. And beautiful people, beautiful, awesome people went on to do what they do. No issues with that whatsoever. And I praise those men because they are good men, right? Smart men. But we as women have to do those three things: seek the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And then we'll choose better and slow it down because you will have a mate. You can have it all, but you have to do it according to the protocols that are set out by God. So
Well,
that's
I'm
all I
glad
want
that
to
that was a lot. And before I get to you, Brooklyn, I do want to mention one thing. I like to do a lot of research. I look at other podcasts and I read a lot. And one of the things that I've noticed that I've heard a lot of is, one of the marriage goals or the relationship goal is sometimes your mate does not have that 100% or whatever it is. So they may come home at the 10%, so you meet them at the 90% and vice versa. And I understand exactly what it is that you're saying, Kimberly, with regards to the men that you chose at that time. They served their purpose, but they weren't for you in this season of your life because our seasons change.
Yes.
And I
yeah.
get that. But what is your take on um, that adage that you give that portion and this? Because at the end of the day, even though you give that 100%, not everybody is ever on the same page, and that's one of the things that I'm hearing here now.
Mhm.
But do you believe in when they don't have without taking over? Because you're being the 100% for yourself and them. Without doing that, what is your take on that?
Yes. So it shouldn't be all the time. And it should be in the beginning stages of the relationship. You're going to notice who's doing most of the calling. He's supposed to call you more than you call him, sure, because he's taking the lead. He's leading the relationship, and you are walking alongside of him as he leads, because he's number one going to be responsible for you. So initially, you need to look at your dating situation because that's going to determine your relationship. Am I doing all the calling? Am I doing all the communicating? Am I doing all the expressing and talking during the phone conversations?
So pay
So
attention to the signs before, because
before
it's always relevant. So
you have
Brooklyn,
to.
let's hear your take on things with regards to relationships.
Well, well, I have not been married, and this might be my mom. I have been engaged, unfortunately. And in that era, I was 19 years old. I'm still learning now, but 19 was a doozy. Being engaged to someone who had a child, stepping into the mom role, moving in way too prematurely, just losing every bit of myself that my parents instilled in me. Just being in a very dysfunctional family again, something that I wasn't used to. Was just the aftermath 4 years later of trying to build myself back up, learning how to build relationships with my family and my friends again has been a doozy for sure. But the hardest one has been trying to build my relationship back with myself, learning how to trust myself again, trust my judgment, trust my gut instinct when it comes to dating or even just creating friendships I lost during, friendships that I gained during, and just, yeah, so
And I
still learning.
think you said a lot, and you're right. At the end of the day, no matter how many relationships we've had or not have, the one long lasting, forever lasting relationship are the ones that we have with ourselves. And
Yes.
that's the one that we need to continue work on every single day. You know, one of the many persons that I love to listen to is Dr. Beatrice Berry. And I said I was going to mention this later in our conversation, but I think this is such a door for it. And one of the things that she said was every day we need to ask ourselves, okay, why me? Not like why me, why this bad thing happened. It could be those things, but just why me? Why do I have this opportunity today to do whatever? And it can be to be a blessing to someone or to receive a blessing from someone. And we always have the why me's every single day. Why me in this season? Look at me, I received this. Look at me, I'm starting something. And why not me? You know, so we're always evolving, we're always working. And as we're going through and we're navigating things. And speaking about navigation, how do you feel about navigating your personal relationships, um, dealing with a family or school for you, Brooklyn, and going into the professional field? Because one thing that Crystal actually mentioned to me, she said, I always said that there should be balance. And she said, well, is it really balance or is it a sacrifice? So let's talk about that. Do you ladies believe that when we do so many things, we're balancing or we're sacrificing? Let's start with you, Doc.
Well, I think the more I live and the more I learn, the more that I know that our perception is our reality, and how we think about things is kind of how we are. And I don't know that I could have spoken, articulated this in my younger age, but I know now everything is a choice, and we choose the way we think. And so, when it comes to that work-life balance, I could say, oh my God, I gotta go get up and do the laundry, and oh, I can't believe I have to go to work, and I'm sacrificing my time for this, and I'm sacrificing my time for that. Or I could say, I've chosen this profession. A lot of the nurses, when I was still delivering babies, they would say, you're the only one who comes in here smiling at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, well, nobody made me do this. I chose to do this. And I was blessed to be able to have this career, to be able to deliver babies. So I'm going to smile. And when I can't smile about it anymore, I won't do it anymore. So I think, so the short answer to your question, Camila, is it can definitely be both. But I think the more that we can go through life and decide, make a choice every morning that I have chosen to have this family, I've chosen to have this husband, I've chosen to have this job, and I'm gonna be glad in it and find contentment. And when I can't make that choice anymore, it's probably better to make a choice to do something else. But I think we do, and I know I've been there. I spent a large part of my earlier life feeling like it's a sacrifice. Oh, all my friends are doing this and all my friends are doing that. But the more, and still, even as I go through life now, I realize, I make a choice to live here in the Virgin Islands. I'm away from most of my blood relatives, but I've been blessed to have another beautiful family here, and I can choose to sacrifice the money or be grateful that I have some cash that I can go get on a plane and go see my family in the stateside when I want to, as often as I want to. So I think it's all in as a man thinketh.
What are your thoughts, Brooklyn?
There's a TED Talk that I watched maybe a couple years ago when I was getting ready to maybe go to med school. I can't remember who it was, but she was mentioning balance versus sacrifice and how it is pretty much both. You have some balls that you need to juggle. At some point, you do need to let some fall. Now, in terms of work, play, school life, I think I found a good balance so far in New Orleans, but this is only because it's my first year in grad school. So maybe I'll find that I'll have to sacrifice a little bit more as I move forward, and then I'll come back and let you know.
What do you think, Don?
Sorry about that. I definitely believe it's both. I agree. It's both. It can be both. And I think the stage of your life will better determine whether it's going to be a sacrifice or a balance. For me, when my children were small, I made the decision to leave my career so that I could come home and be a full-time homemaker. That was a sacrifice. That was a sacrifice. I gave up my career. I gave up everything I knew to do what I thought was going to be the best for my children and be the best in the long run. So then with that, once that sacrifice was made, then I had to begin the balancing act. I had to balance between being strong for myself, being a partner or a wife, being a mother. And then with those roles came other roles. Then I was a volunteer in the community, and I sat on every board at the schools that they were in, and I was in the PTA. And so then I became a member in those groups as well. And then I was involved in my church. So that's where the balancing act came in. But it was definitely the sacrifice that then led to me having to balance all of the different roles that I took on as a result of making that sacrifice. So it's both, and it depends on the season that you're in your life as to how you make it work.
Kimberly?
Yes, it's definitely both. You can balance it like it'll just like John said, the season that you're in your life. Right now I'm raising two teenagers, and I am excited about being able to shape them and form them before they leave. At the same time, I have to look towards what's next for me. So right now I'm learning more about myself, more about my preferences, and more about what I'm going to enjoy as a woman at this phase in my life. And while I'm raising them, I'm working on myself. So you can definitely have that balance.
Yes, and speaking about balance, we also need to include boundaries. And we know the boundaries are all for ourselves. How has that been setting boundaries with regards to everything that we have in place for ourselves?
Well, for me,
Yeah.
I had to shrink my circle. Um, I come from a family of very strong women, but at the same time, I used to have allowed them to have too much input in my life. So I had to stake out, what is it that I really want? I want really well balanced children, and what's that going to take? It's going to take focusing in on them. So including all the family like I used to in my decisions, and including all the family like I used to in my day-to-day life, phone calls, texts, I had to stop that and bring my circle down, because they felt, because of me, that they were entitled to input in everything in my life. And so I had to strike the boundaries to where I said, you know what, as far as it's concerned, right now, the children are the priority, and I'll get to everybody else when I get to everybody else. So I had to set boundaries on my time, on my communication, and on the expectation that my family had of me to always be involved in what they're doing and to pull them into what I was doing. So it was difficult at first because they didn't understand why I didn't have time to stop what I was doing and speak to them on the phone because I'm busy with the children, or I'm preparing dinner, or cleaning up, or we're doing some homework. So I had to really place boundaries with the most intimate people, right? But I felt good about it because I'm investing in my children. My family members are already grown. I've been entrusted with the responsibility God gave me. So I have to set the boundaries around that to protect that so that I can focus. So boundaries are absolutely necessary. They're not a bad thing. And it's required of all of us.
How do you feel about boundaries, Brooklyn?
Well, I have my parents to thank for my strong willedness. I don't think I've ever had a problem saying no until I guess I was in that family where I had a child, lived in their house, had to live by their rules and how I would raise my son, so to speak. But I think now I'm getting back to be able to say no. Like, this is what I have. This is what I can do. This is 100%. But it's something that definitely my parents, my mom, and especially my dad have told me not to be afraid to say no. So I think I'll test that now going into the workforce, but we'll see.
Go ahead, Deborah. You have that look on your face like, oh, really?
No, I just kind of about the question. I think my difficulty with boundaries has always been probably more personal. It's just because I've always, and probably because of my parents and family just was kind of made to believe that I was Superwoman and I could do everything. And so I went about most of my life trying to do everything and to be everything and to get everything in. And it's really, and it's really been a challenge for me to kind of take it down a notch, to realize, A, I've already done a lot, and B, I can still do a lot, but there's just a way to do things. Like, I'm the kind of person when I'm going on vacation, I kind of plan it from, 6:00 in the morning to 12 a.m. when it's time to go to sleep. So, and I'm still like that.
See, and it's the law of inverse reactions that have got me to learn how to say no, because I see how she burns.
But I'm trying, and also realizing that that's kind of who I am, and that's when I kind of thrive, when I'm kind of busy and doing things, but really trying to set boundaries for myself to, okay, all right, and especially as I get older, I gotta stop, I gotta take a day of rest. So I really listen to my body, and when it's saying, okay, you can't do anything today, just kind of lay in bed, I'll give myself those, a day here once or twice a month where I just kind of chill and not do anything. But I think I've probably always been fairly good about setting boundaries with other folks, but it's just trying to limit myself to do what I can do and do well and not keep taking on more and more and more.
Don?
Boundaries are very important. I learned that way too late. I was not good at setting boundaries. As a matter of fact, I believe that was a big downfall for me. If you don't put boundaries on yourself, you can better believe that the other people around you, they have boundaries. So they're using their boundaries, but if you don't have boundaries, you're going to get overrun by everybody else's needs for you. Because I was running around being everything to all people, had no boundaries of my own. And then when I was going to call on the people that I was serving, they were utilizing their boundaries. And so I had no access. So you have to have boundaries. I liken them to circles around me. And it's, how many people am I going to let into my inner circles, and how close in am I going to let them be? I had everybody in my first 2 circles when they really needed to be in the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th circle. But I had everybody right up in my business. I told too much of my business to too many people because of lack of boundaries. So boundaries are extremely important for your own mental health. They're extremely important.
That is true. And one thing, when listening to all you ladies talk about boundaries, what stood out to me was Brooklyn. And I know that I had to work at boundaries. Kimberly had to work at it. Deborah had to work at it. Don is now learning about it. And because of our lack of knowledge with regards to boundaries and the importance of the boundaries, we knew that that was a word. We knew that it was something, but we didn't know that it was something that we should do. One, I don't know if it faltered because we're women, but we didn't make that mistake. At least, Deborah, you didn't make that mistake with Brooklyn. You let her know ahead of time, listen, set boundaries. So Brooklyn, it was quick to say, I never had a problem with saying no. See, I know, being a recovering people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser.
My name is Kimberly, and I'm a people pleaser.
My name is Dawn, and I'm a people pleaser.
Quick little story. When Brooklyn, I guess, first moved to St. Thomas, she was maybe 6, 7, or 8, and me with my no boundaries, had her in everything. And then one of the children's moms from the school called and said, well, I tried to give Brooklyn an invitation to the birthday party, but she wouldn't even take it. She said she was just too busy. So I said, Brooklyn.
Good for you, Brooklyn.
She went to
Good
the party.
for you. Yeah, so these are the things that are
We lost us.
important. No, we can hear you still. These are the things that are important that we had to grow to learn. And
Yes.
because I know that each and every person that's on this panel, you guys have individual yet collective relationships with me. And we're so much alike. And we've grown together and we've bounced off of each other to help each other throughout whatever the situation was at that time. But I know the one thing that we ain't doing anymore, we're not being one of those people pleasers. We retired, we graduated, we got our coins.
We got our battle scars. And
We're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore.
It's so important. Like what she was saying is, you show up for everybody. You show up for everybody, right? You wouldn't have imagined not showing up for everybody. But then when you make that call, I'm busy, don't answer, can't do it. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, that's something that I have to learn.
And then the one thing that we're prone to do, we're the ones that do non-judgments. We have a comment here from Joe Marrero. Toughest challenges about boundaries, in my opinion, is the possible reactions or causes of effect, and to just be prepared for them. And it does open your eyes to those who truly respect you. And you're right, because the boundaries we set isn't for the individual, it's for us. And as we said it, that we have to be prepared for that backlash. And one new phrase that I learned is you're going to have to be well oiled. So when you get that, it just runs right off of you. It just runs right off. Having boundaries is very important. And yes, thank you so much for that comment, Miss Marrero. Come on in. Juan, I'm sorry. Everyone else, comment. Let it come in. Let it come in. And we're parents. Other than Brooklyn, we're all parents, and we want our kids to be better than us. We all went through certain things, and people talk about generational instances, but I know each and every one of us here, we're breaking that. We're not doing any generational curses. If it's not a generational blessing, we're not having it. But in this time and era of our lives and phases, I know raising children, there is no bullet point. There's no one way to do it. But let's talk about parenting. Let's start with you, Kimberly.
Yeah. The key that I have found to parenting is having the same level of respect for your child that you expect them to have for you. A lot of times parents want to yell at kids and hit kids and, discipline kids and talk to kids in ways and handle children in ways that they would never allow the child to handle them. And when you show them that respect, they open up to you. And like I said, I have two teenagers, 15 and 16 years old, and we have open dialogue. And another thing is you can't ever be shocked at something they tell you. Your hair might be singeing at the scalp at what they just told you, but you can't react like that. You go, oh, wow, because you want them to remain open. And I've just found that through all the, the spankings and the talkings and the taking the devices and the punishments, they don't work. They don't work. And in fact, I respect my children so much that I tell them, listen, you already know what's expected of you. Don't make me do that silly little stuff that people have to do to show you discipline. You already know. You expect me to do what I'm supposed to do. I expect you to do what you're supposed to do. And surprisingly enough, since they were like 7, and it's not foolproof, but since they were like 7 years old, it's really worked. And they've been a lot easier to parent because of the respect that I showed them, and now they show me.
Good. Don?
Yes, I agree with what you just said. I ran the gamut. I did the spanking. I did the punishing. I did all that. My son was so stubborn. You would tell him not to do something. You'd spank him. He'd cry, and then he'd turn around and go right back and do it. And it's like, okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Something has to give here. And so what I ended up doing is just speaking with them, just speaking with them and allowing them to express themselves, because that's something that I didn't really have when I was growing up. You know, you they told you what you needed to do and you shut up and you went and you did it, and that was it. There was no, you know, if you had an opinion, it was because they gave it to you. You know, so I had to start telling them, well, let me know how you're feeling. Let me know what you think. Now, I told them what my expectations were. Another thing that I did, I learned from an early age with them, was I never made promises if I wasn't 100% positive that I could keep them. Because I needed them to see that I was going to do what I say I was going to do. And if I could do that, then it would make them be the same way. So when it came to their behavior, if they knew that I was going to do what I said I was going to do, or if I came right out and they'd say, Mommy, do you promise? No, Mommy doesn't promise, because I don't know if I can do it. But because I did that, the things that I did do, then they realized, well, wait a minute, we have an agreement. You know, Mommy agreed that she would do this.
Yes.
And I agreed that I would behave and I would not get my folder signed.
Yes.
And so that's how we ended up getting the communication and building the relationship that we built.
Yes.
And I know one of the things that we make jest of or joke of, because we're like, well, we were growing up, we know, or you can tell a West Indian child, or you can tell this because of the, and we laugh about it. But one of the things that I will say that's important is definitely communication. Because I know when I discipline my daughter, all I would have to do is give her that look. That look meant sit down, shut up, do this, do that. I didn't have to do much of anything. And she really was a good child. Mm-hmm. But also, one thing that every time I punished her, she knew in the tail. So why did I beat you, or why are you being punished? Or, we had that communication and that dialogue as to why something has taken place. It wasn't just shut up and sit down, you do as you're told. I wanted her to understand why she was being punished, why we're not doing this, or why we were doing this, or why there's a pause. I needed her to know the why. Mm-hmm. That was important to me, because many times I didn't know a why. It was just, we gotta switch.
Because I said so.
Right, because I said so, but that didn't even do anything for you. The behavior probably didn't even change, really.
Yes, exactly. And not only that, you build up a lot of internal resentment and things that we can't talk about. And let's face it, it hindered a lot of our mental health.
Yes, it did.
Yes.
It really hindered a lot of our mental health. And I know, and that one of the reasons why I think mental health is a cliche. Let's talk a little bit about what your feelings are, because I know, Donna, this is your baby. You're in the mental health field. So let's talk about that, things, childhood trauma, and dealing with that now as adults.
It's heavy. That is it's a heavy burden, because when you were talking about, we don't accept a lot of generational curses and we're not receiving. But when it comes to mental health, when it comes to trauma, the interesting thing is that as women, we are born with all of the eggs that we will ever use in our lifetime. We come here with them. The thing about that, though, is those eggs carry DNA, and they carry the DNA from our mothers, as well as from our grandmothers, as our great-grandmothers. It's passed down. So unresolved trauma is passed down from generation to generation, which is why it is so important that we now have to say it ends with us. Yes. Because what ends up happening is my daughter has now, if I'm not willing to unpack my own trauma and work through it with her and engage in a healthy dialogue, she is now carrying my baggage, my mother's baggage, my grandmother's baggage, and then we're expecting her to be healthy and a productive member of society, and she can't even figure out what the heck is going on because she doesn't know what she's inherited. So it's very important that we identify our trauma and we unpack it and deal with it. Because if we don't deal with our trauma will definitely deal with us.
I agree. Kimberly?
Yeah, I agree totally that with what Dawn was saying, I learned a while ago that trauma can go as far as, and Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 14 generations.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so we're already, dealing with a lot from that far back. So yeah, absolutely. I think trauma is something that we really have to, and speaking of our parenting styles, not to inflict more trauma. And I think it's very necessary for us to understand they're already carrying stuff, right? So we don't need to add to that just to help them through that.
And as we go through dealing with trauma and our everyday lives, how do we intertwine when we to trying to hold it together and deal with everything like loss or grief, or and we're still trying to be that whole person that, okay, I know this happened, but I still have to hold it together.
Mhm.
No, we
Dawn,
need to get help. We need to get help. We need to get help. And I know growing up, therapy, that was a taboo. You didn't do that because you weren't supposed to air your dirty laundry in public. You weren't supposed to do that. But that's a lot to hold on to yourself. And if it were as simple as I just need to hold it together and get over it, then it wouldn't be generational. Trauma wouldn't be generational if it was that easy. You have to unpack it. And the only way to unpack it is to really be able to talk about it, to stare it in the face, and to get to the bottom of it. And you can't do that without help. Therapy is incredibly important. It's incredibly important because we cannot do it all by ourselves. We can't.
That I understand that, and you're right. Therapy
Mhm.
is important, and trauma, dealing with childhood trauma, bringing it forward and trying to be the parents it is that our children deserve isn't easy. But you're right, it has to go forward, and we have to make that attempt to get the help that we need. Kimberly, what is your take on dealing with this?
Yeah, I'm 100% advocate of therapy because, as you know, Camille, and some other people, I lost my father in January 21, got divorced in August of 2021, and lost my mother in 2021. And I had two kids, raising them as a single mother and working. So yeah, you talk about holding it together so tight and scared anything slip, you're just going to pop. I had to get into therapy because I hadn't even grieved. I was afraid to grieve my parents' death and the loss of my marriage. Even though he and I are very good friends, it was still a loss.
Well,
So
yes.
I didn't even grieve any of it. And I went to my doctor. My doctor said, okay, you're going to pop and wind up in the institution because you haven't dealt with any of this and you haven't taken any time off. So that's when he said, if you can't take any time off, you have to get therapy. And I agreed. Because you look like you're okay. And sometimes you even think you're okay. But nobody should be okay after two deaths and a divorce. What? That's impossible. And trying to raise kids and keep them, well and healthy too. So yeah, the definitely the trauma of life and all that loss. Yeah, I'm 100% advocate of therapy. Absolutely. And for children too.
Yes.
Because I
Absolutely.
think
Yes.
children need therapy also because they deal with things as well. And they may not be
I'm an
so
advocate.
focused.
Yes.
I even believe that in addition to therapy, just sharing your story
Yes.
with other
Yes.
people, because you don't realize how common your story is until you start talking to people.
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
for me, I got divorced in 22, and then almost the exact day of my 1 year anniversary, I lost my son. So I was divorced in February of 22. I lost my son in February of 23. And that was just, whew, that's when your faith kicks in. That's when your faith kicks in. That's when your village kicks in, and that's when you really seek therapy, because otherwise it just falls apart. But so I was in a grief support group, and I did speak with a therapist. And one of the things that was recommended to me was that I share my story, because I was told that healing comes from sharing your story with others. Because what happens is you start sharing your story with others, and then you sharing your story can lead them to therapy, because they want to know, well, how did you get through it? Well, this is what I did. And then that encourages them to go through that process. And then as you keep talking to more and more and more people, now you've developed a community of people who are now leaning on one another and leaning on the support of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Deborah, what are your thoughts with regards to therapy and dealing with trauma from childhood to now?
Am I mute? I am definitely a fan, and I encourage it. And I, even as a physician, I certainly speak to all of my patients about normalizing it as a part of that. We all need a mental health checkup yearly, just in our families, to try to get my patients to do it. And I see women, and certainly to encourage them to have their family members do it. But I think, and I concur with what everybody else has said. And I remember I had a big 50th birthday party in Opelika, and my pastor from there said, I had a bunch of friends there, and he said, you guys keep in touch. He was so impressed that we were still friends after 30 years. He said, not just for the good times, but also for the bad times. And that really resonated with me, because so many of us in that group had been through so much stuff that we never even shared. We kind of were living the Facebook life before there really was a Facebook. And that really just, opened up some doors for me to say, yeah, let's talk about the bad times, because people, and I was taught growing up in the South, that you don't tell everybody your business, and you don't want everybody in your business. And I think that's certainly true to a certain extent. But I mean, as we create our circles and know who's supposed to be in it, we have to feel comfortable sharing some of these things, because that's the only way that we can make it, because we need each other. God didn't put us here to be islands. And I think that definitely a professional is important, but I think it is as important to, as the other ladies have mentioned, that we tell our stories to each other, so that we can be there for each other every day, not just on the one day a week or the hour a week that we get to go see the therapist, if we see them that often.
Brooklyn, being the youngest of the crew, and I'm not one for the Gen Z. The minute I don't know what I am, I'm just Camilla. So tell me, what is your take on being the youngest of the group? What are your age group? How do you guys feel about therapy?
I think, as I try to speak for a whole generation, I think we're definitely more open to therapy. We're open to medications, open to talking about our various diagnoses or whatever. But I think more that what we talk about is trying to find the right fit. Because starting in therapy is just like trying to find the right doctor, the right gynecologist, the right whomever, because you might find in the wrong spaces, therapy can be very re-traumatizing. And I think that's something that we don't think about. I mean, when I was first starting state therapy, it was mostly older white men who just wanted to push pills. So I think another thing, especially as a Black woman, as a younger Black woman, keeping an eye out for that kind of thing. The over medicalization of it versus the actual community of it, like I said, which is, I think, is like Mom said. So I think it is better to start with your community and try to find the right fit on an individual level, just, because it's dangerous sometimes.
I love that, and you're right. A lot of times people are afraid of it because they do tend to over medicate, and because of your race or your gender, you're not necessarily taken seriously and what your issues or concerns are. And and Doc, I know you can speak about it, being an OBGYN. Many times when women go to the doctor, and women of color, were underheard or understood because we were forced to. I know that we interviewed a year ago or a year or two ago, and you said something, and I'm paraphrasing, that you know, persons of color or tend to withstand more than other races, so they weren't being taken seriously. And that also interfered not only with our healthcare, but also with our state of mind. Do you want to elaborate? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I may have said that certainly I think in some areas of medicine they're taught, oh well, black people don't, or people of color don't tend to experience as much pain as others, so they can take more. So maybe people would, providers would do procedures on them without giving them the appropriate anesthesia, or there's stories about people who go to the emergency room complaining of chest pain, that with a people of color weren't taken as seriously, told that they had gas or indigestion, when in fact they were having a heart attack. So here again, it's important for us to learn to be advocates for ourselves, and advocates for our families. And that means you got to start with that bond, or even friends and family. Doesn't necessarily mean a blood bond, but somebody who's going to be ride or die and be there for you, and someone you come back and say, oh, I heard this, and does this sound right? Or to be knowledgeable enough and comfortable enough in your own skin to be able to make assertions, like Brooklyn just said, because most of the time we think, oh, it's just us, I must be doing something wrong there again, versus saying, this is maybe not the right for me. Just like how we started off talking about relationships, it's so important that we learn who we are, what we want, and to be, be true to it, so that when we go into any relationship, including with our professional providers, we can say, yeah, I don't think this is it. Or be able to say, yeah, I hear you, and I understand that may work for somebody else, but this is what I need, and let's go down some different pathways so that I can achieve what my goal is. So all comes back to relationships, right?
Yes, it all comes back to relationships, because God is a God of relationships. So he wants us to have a relationship with him, and then everything else is connected. And as we go through with our relationships, dealing with our careers, being parents, aspiring to be parents, our everyday lives, how do we take that time to do the self-care in addition to therapy and working on our mental health? What are some tips that you guys can give us, our listening audience? And our audience, we're right here. If you have any questions or concerns for Kimberly, Don, Brooklyn, Deborah, please just put them in the chat. We definitely want this to be an interactive conversation, because it's not all the time you have 5 powerful women on the same platform, and we're here. So let's talk about self-care, not just going to the spa and getting a spa treatment. True self-care. Let's start with you, Don.
Okay, well, but I do go to the spa. That is a part of self-care. I would say this. You have to be as intentional about your self-care as you are about being there for others. So you have to schedule it. I have had to start setting timers for myself. So in the morning, I have my praise and worship time. I have to have my journaling time. And that's important, because I'm journaling, and then there are going to be times when a month or two from now, I'm going to go back and look at what I wrote down a month or two from now and go, oh, wow, I did that. I overcame that, and so it's important that you journal, that you have your prayer time, that you go to the spa. You need to do all of those things. So I would say be as intentional about scheduling time for yourself as you are about putting everybody else on your calendar. Start putting yourself on there first. You need to put your time slots in, and then everybody else has to fit into your time slots. So if you start intentionally making yourself a priority, then it becomes a practice. And then you have to fit everybody else in, as opposed to the other way around.
I agree. What about you, Kimberly? Tips for
Yeah,
self-care?
that is so true. I've learned that first person that I have to care for is myself, or else I can't care for anybody else. Well, so that means for me is getting understanding what I need in order to feel good physically. And just as Dawn was saying, yes, we do our nails and we have our praise and worship, we have our relationship with God, and then we have to decide, okay, what's going to allow me to continue with this life I have that's so busy, that's so involved. So for me, I have to eat well, so I've got with a nutritionist because I noticed that if I'm a certain size, I'm not happy. So that's just how it is for me. So what I have to do, like Dawn said, I have to be intentional about how I eat, what I eat, so that I'll feel good and I can move forward. So the self-care portion of it, it has to come first. It has to come first. When you have a business, they tell you when you get a paycheck, who do you pay first? You take something out for you first. So self-care has to be the number one priority for you first, and then of course you balance everything else around it.
What about you, Brooklyn? Give us some advice on self-care.
I think my journey with self-care started with reparentification. She's a wonderful mom, but just being able to self-regulate in a way that's saying, you're okay, you're fine. What is it that's making you upset? What will make you feel better in the moment? If it's a relationship issue, do I want to be, am I missing touch? Am I missing, what do I do? I find ways that I have active that kind of somatic response, whether it's dancing or just being active or even cuddling with a friend or a pet or a weighted blanket. I think it just depends on what my body needs or what I feel like I need in that moment, or my friends need in that moment. Sometimes we do it together, whether it is something they're having on campus, it's a glass of wine, the group read. There's just so many levels to it that I think really just depends on my relationship with myself and how I'm feeling and what I know I need in that moment.
Yes. You know you're next, Deborah.
Yeah, everybody had already stolen my answer, so I was trying to quote one of my good friends who wrote a book, and Camila has interviewed her before, Dr. Onika Williams. She wrote a book called Not Today, Negativity, and she has all these great acronyms for self-care. Just in general, I believe in having a spiritual practice, the things that we talked about. When I wake up in the morning, I try not to just get up. I have my little app. I look at my Bible verse. Sometimes I look at my fabulous app. I try to meditate a little bit, listen to the fan, and if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm like, okay, God, why'd you wake me up? It's somebody I'm supposed to be praying for. What's going on? So those kinds of things to really get in my rituals where I'm a woman. I really like my regimentation. So I try to get up and try to exercise, do a little tidying up around the house, and all of those things just kind of get me centered for the day. And I couldn't find the self part of it. It'll come up. And she's told me so many times that I'm going to write it down and keep it on my arm. But the care part, care for your body, which I think we talked about. That can be the exercise, what we eat, going to the spa, getting our nails done, getting our hair done. Awareness, just advance awareness, being conscious of what's around us. All of that's caring for ourselves. Revel in rest, she says. And I think that when you feel like you just can't, and even when we don't feel like we can't go on, still just don't let ourselves get totally tapped out, but just rest. Realize it's okay. And God even gave us a whole day and said, rest on this day. And then what's the last one? I can't read my own writing.
Expand enjoyment.
Expand enjoyment. Very important. Just what makes you happy? What do you like? Do you like to go for a walk? Do you like to just sit around and watch TV? Can you give yourself permission to just be mindless on your phone for an hour? Watch something crazy, binge something, whatever it is, that we enjoy. And some of us have got so busy taking care of other people, we don't even know what we enjoy anymore. To just really get to know ourselves, well, do I like to go to the beach? Do I like to get in the ocean? Do I like the sand? Whatever it is, really just think about what it is that brings us joy. Gardening, find those things, take the time to develop all of these aspects so we have that great relationship with ourselves where we're really exploring who it is, what we want, and what brings us joy.
I agree. I agree with everything. Jay said, I find boundaries really difficult as people pleaser and non-confrontational person, fearing the negative reactions of others shrinks my boundaries and needs. How do you build them? Who wants to take that question?
I'll go first with a brief.
Let
Okay,
her
go
go.
ahead. Go ahead. Let Brooklyn go. Go ahead, Brooklyn.
I'll try to keep my answer short. What I've been hearing more about boundaries and what I do believe is boundaries are not necessarily meant to keep people out. It's meant to keep the people who respect you, as Juan said, in. So we have to think about it that way. The people who respect you want within those boundaries, the people who you need to have in your life. You have constantly people who are constantly trying to just respect you. They really don't need to be there. So I think it's just shifting the way that we think about boundaries, not keeping people out, but keeping the people who need to be in our lives. And I think with that mental shift, we can start to look at it just a little bit differently, not necessarily, I don't know, snubbing people, but being there for yourself. So maybe that's one way to start.
I like that. Renewing your mind. So don't focus on getting rid of, focus on embracing who is. Kimberly?
Love that.
The more authentic we are, the happier we are, the more our soul is fed, and the more godly we are. We can hear better from God when we're being authentic. The person who's asking about the boundaries, God expects you to take care of yourself and to draw the lines of boundaries for yourself. Because if you are pleasing everybody, you can't really focus on you and what the Creator is trying to tell you. So yeah, just as Brooklyn said, boundaries are not to shut people out. Boundaries are to make sure you're fortifying yourself and becoming fully effective in the way that God created you for the people He created you to be effective for. If you keep putting out and putting out and putting out, and if I'm upset with you because you can't do something for me, well, I will eventually get over it, to be honest with you. But you can't deplete yourself. And this is something I've learned. You just can't deplete yourself because people don't appreciate it anyway. Those that will get mad at you because you're not going to do what they want you to do, they don't have your self-care. That's another thing. They don't have your best interest at heart. But you got to keep yourself authentic. If it's no, it's no. If it's I can't, I can't. You say it's too much for me. But you have to have those boundaries so that you can keep your space authentic and clear it out enough to hear from the Father. So you may be drawing boundaries with them, but it's so that you can clear the way for communication with Him. And that is okay.
And the one thing that both Kimberly and Brooklyn said, at the end of the day, it's for you to have that clear space of mind. Because once you set that boundary of something that you did, once you do it, you may have resentment, you may feel even more depleted, and then you still beat yourself up for doing whatever it is that person asked of you, and you knowing that you really couldn't. But because you are in the people pleasing phase, you figure, let me do it because they will appreciate me more. But the relationship, at least one of the takeaways that I would love for everyone to have, you're the person that you're going to have the longest relationship with. And I'm not saying that Brooklyn's not saying, Kimberly's not saying, I'm not saying to shut people out, but you have to build the circle that it is that you want, and starting with that foundation. You are the foundation of people that you need to attract, not necessarily want to attract, but that you need to attract. There's a difference.
Amen.
So
Amen.
Deborah, do you want to add? Don, do you want to add?
I would say to appease the people pleaser in yourself, take a page out of their playbook. Pay attention to how some of your friends and family members set their boundaries, so that you can see how that works. Start engaging in dialogue with your friends, and find out how do they make their boundaries work for them, because I'm sure that when they tell you that they can't do something, you're respectful of that. And so you need to take a page from their playbook and make it work for you.
You want to add anything, Deborah?
Nope. I think they've said it all very well.
So, I mean, as we go through our lives and we're in this present state, I know many times we have difficulties being present, and being a people pleaser. Sometimes we have issues being right now, what we're experiencing, being right now here on this show at whatever time it is in your time zone. We're focusing on what the shoulda, woulda, couldas, the I should, I can't, I will. But what I want you guys to talk about or mention is, what would you tell young Deborah Lynn Wright Francis Hugh? What would Brooklyn tell the younger version of Brooklyn? What would Kimberly tell the younger Kimberly Rodriguez? And what would Don tell the younger Don Jeffries? At this point in your life, what advice would you give the younger version of you? Brooklyn, let's start with you.
um, I go back to 2019 and just think it's okay. You haven't met all the people who are going to love you yet. You have not explored the depths of yourself that you have learned to love as yet. So keep moving. It's going to be okay.
Yes. Kimberly?
Yeah. Listen to yourself, be authentically yourself, do what you need to do to fortify your relationship between you and your creator, and open up yourself to respect yourself and accept yourself enough to truly enjoy life and be effective and do it what it is that agrees with your soul so you can grow.
Deborah?
Um, I think what I would say to myself, and even though church was one of the first place, I'm sure the first place that my mom ever took me, because that's just how I was raised. But I think even though I was in the church, I don't know that church and God and my faith was in me where it should. So I think if I could tell myself, I would say pray more, go to God first, and don't worry so much. And go to those scriptures that that He has a plan for me. And if I slow down and go to Him for everything and have faith, He's going to give me the life and the family and the job and the career and all those things that I worried about so much when I was younger. That to know that, to really have that good faith, if I wish I could, that I have now, that when I in my teens and 20s, that God has got me and He's going to work it all out, and to have faith that He was going to work it all out. So I would just say be stronger in my faith. Go to God more, build a relationship with God earlier in my life. That's what I think that I would encourage myself to do, and certainly try to encourage any other young people that I meet.
Don?
I would definitely say strengthen your faith, because without it, you will lose your mind. You have to definitely strengthen your faith. I would also say um, be gentle on yourself. Extend yourself some grace, because we can be so hard on ourselves. As a matter of fact, I think we are our worst enemy. So we have to extend the grace to ourselves that we would extend to others. And then another important thing I learned, I grew up hearing don't look back. But I would challenge you and say, no, look back, look back, because it's when you look back that you see how far you have come. The only thing I would add to that is when you look back, don't stare too long. Look back, take notes, and keep it moving forward.
Yes, I love that. I love that. One of my favorite quotes is, "Today I'll build a bridge out of faith and love that will take me from where I am to where I want to be." So every day it's going to be grace and love to take me where it is that I need to be. And I'm grateful. I really am grateful. I'm grateful for everything that I've experienced, and I'm grateful for each and every single one of you, and the time and the information that you guys have brought forth, and your transparency. Thank you so much for sharing. And I want for each of you to just give our closing remarks, because I thought we would have been here long, but we're making excellent time. And I want you to give our listening audience that one nugget before we say our goodbyes, even though I don't want to, because there's so much more I would love to cover. So let's start with you, Kimberly.
Okay. All right. I've pressed the button and I don't know how to get back. Oh, there I am. Okay. Um, well, my main thing is living authentic, seeking the highest truth through God and allowing Him to guide you authentically through your preferences, through your purposes, and just the truth about why you're even here. I think the main thing we have to understand is we're all talented, we're all capable, we're all intellectual, but really you were put here to be connected with God to serve a purpose on this earth. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to, be a missionary. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do some grand thing that gets a lot of publicity. But first and foremost, people, tell the truth to yourself. Okay? Be honest with you. And then you be honest with those around you. And as long as you are living in your truth, the truth according to what God is telling you that you need, staying connected with Him, then everyone else that is supposed to be in your circle, that is supposed to be around you to fortify that, will stick with you. Stop people pleasing. Stop hanging out and dating people because they like you. Make sure that you are true to yourself and living in a truth that says, I like this, I need this, I'm here, I prefer this. And don't make the mistake that so many of us have made, allowing other people's input to determine your destiny. You'd be a good this, you'd be a good that. Remain true to yourself because God gave you that. And you have to remain true to that because if you don't, you're going to live your life in lack, complete and total lack, no matter how much money you make, no matter how many accolades. If you're living against the truth that is you, what you like, what you want to be, what you want to do, and how you want to affect this world and what you want to have, you have to live authentically in your truth because God gives you that and He gives you your desires. So that is my main mantra. Live in truth, live authentic. And this
Thank
life
you.
will be a great life.
Thank
And
you.
you'll get what is you need, whatever you need and want.
Brooklyn?
I think playing to the theme of not being afraid to be authentic is also not being afraid to make mistakes. No matter how old you are or where you're
Yeah.
starting, learn from our our mistakes, and our mistakes eventually lead us to where we're supposed to be. So don't be afraid or trying to hold your breath, trying to be perfect in whatever it is that you are trying to be. Be open to failure,
Yeah.
open to learning, so you can eventually get to where you need.
Yes, that's true words of wisdom. Be open to failure. Deborah?
Um, I just go back to what I said before and kind of echoing what Pastor Kimberly just said. I think, have faith, get a relationship with God. And I don't know who said it, but I love it. It says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Our
Yes.
thoughts are so powerful. So let's be positive.
I love that. I love that. Don?
Yes. I'm going to echo the same thing as being your most authentic self. And I would even say just never stop trying to be the best version of yourself. Because if we are so blessed, we will never stop learning, we will never stop growing. So, one of the things I raised my children to say was good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better best.
Amen.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Amen.
Love it. Now, I mean, you ladies are so full of purpose and you're purposeful, like Sarah Jake said. And what you brought through or brought forth here today was so impactful. It was empowering. It was encouraging. Um, I'm just so glad that I did this because I wanted to make an impact based on so many things that we go through. And the reasons why I chose women, and I know men are impactful, we're the nurturers and we're the givers. And I'm not saying men aren't giving, and I'm not saying men don't nurture or support, but I needed everyone to hear our point of view, to hear it coming from us, what it is that we go through on an everyday basis. So as we give ourselves grace, everyone else will give us the grace that we deserve, because we're deserving of it all. And I just want to say thank you, Brooklyn. Thank you for your point of view. I said that having a younger person would be a great idea, but you're actually were the oldest person in this group. Your words of wisdom was so impactful. And I just
Yes.
want to say thank you. And age is truly nothing but a number, because you taught me so much here today. And I want to say thank you, Deborah, for suggesting it, because it was a phenomenal idea. I want to say, Don, thank you for saying yes. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you all for your transparency.
Thank
Thank you all
you.
for being my sisters. Thank you all for just being purposeful and in your purpose. Um,
We love
we
you.
had a wonderful, wonderful time here. And I don't know why I'm getting so emotional, but right now I'm getting so emotional, so very emotional. I
We got
prepared a
you. We
glass of
got you.
you and I don't even know where it is.
Yes. Well, we have to give you your flowers, Kamala,
Yes.
because
Yes.
you birthed this. You made this happen. You made this happen. And as for me, you're always that voice in my head that is constantly telling me that I am more and I
Yep.
can be more and I can do more and to not give up. You know, without you, I would never have sat on a panel like this. So I thank
Thank you.
you.
For sure.
I
Thank you.
did know that. Thank you so much, Camilla. We love you so much, and we're blessed to have you in our lives. Yeah.
Yes.
I feel the same way.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much. So much. I was going to say something else, but I don't even remember. As I said, I'm so emotional. But one takeaway that I will say, that the seeds that have been planted here will definitely blossom to great, great fruits. It's going to be fruits of release, fruits of freedom, fruits of food for thought, fruits of, okay, I have another chance, fruits of that's not the end. And those plants are going to be so sweet and so juicy for each seed that you ladies planted here today. I just want to say, everyone, to our listening audience, thank you for spending your Sunday here with us on Let's Talk About You. I told you that even though we started a little late, it was worth it, and it was definitely worth it. You guys have a phenomenal week, and stay blessed on purpose.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
I'm glad it's over.
You did great.